This week's episode was brought to you by Joshua Stevens. Thank you, Joshua Stevens. It's with the help of listeners like you that we get to keep making shows about strange esoteric content every week. If you'd like to support the show, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 a month will get you access to not only our entire library of extended episodes, but our Discord server too, which is the best place to communicate with other fans and creators of the show. You'll also get a 5x5 vinyl bonus sticker of our cover art sent directly to you at no additional cost. On this week's show, we discussed the creation of a new life form, one being born at this very moment. The seeds which, forbidding some extinction-level disaster, will grow to envelop and surpass all aspects of human life. A truly artificial intelligence, or a computer-based life form with equal or greater levels of intelligence, awareness, and autonomy than the humans who created it, bringing with it the potential to permanently alter the course of human history faster and more dramatically than is even yet possibly imaginable. Will we become cavemen? Robot food? Utopian cyborgs? Or destroy the entire planet before any of these occur? What happens next is up to you. Thank you, and enjoy the show. I was trying to think of my first interaction with AI, and it goes back a long way. I remember when I was a kid, it might have been on the 486 computer in the back. It may have been a Windows 3.1 machine. I don't really remember, but I would assume it's really early 90s. There was this program where you were a knight and you enter into a dragon's cave and the dragon talks to you like through text and you can respond back to it through text and it'll like reply intelligibly to you. And this was like a toy I could play with. Like, I don't know, I must have been like 5 or 6 years old. So it must have been like 91, 92. And if you say something to piss the dragon off, he'll just like light you on fire and the game starts over again.
Sounds like real life.
Is this like a text-based RPG kind of thing?
Yeah, it was a text-based game, and the whole point of it was to demonstrate how great this AI was at responding to humans.
You know what happens now when they make artificial intelligent bots and put them on social media? Within hours, they're just spewing slurs and hateful rhetoric.
Yeah, because it just scans the whole internet and like, oh, this is wise. This is what everybody puts out, and it's just talking shit. Like,
look how many likes are on this hail tweet or whatever.
They learn very quickly.
Wait, so you're telling me if you just put AI on Twitter, it'll get equally as aggressive as...
No, they've put bots on Twitter and they have to shut them down within hours because of, like, bots don't understand jokes in the same way that a human does or sarcasm. So it just starts spamming random things that are probably offensive.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we don't just get the jab for COVID-19. Nay, we take gene therapy to a whole new level so we could breathe water, grow longer telomeres, and sprout rainbow pubic hair that matches our new X-ray eyes we use to observe distant supernova with our hydraulic spinal cord with GPS super tracking and satellite Wi-Fi, so we can share the pictures we took using occipital cortex integration, because this week we're discussing the impending technological singularity and the nearly unavoidable march toward the creation of a self-governing superintelligence that would make Elon Musk cream in his pants. I'm your host, logging in from the transcendental object at the end of time, Hack Rabbit. I'm joined this week by the fairy cyborg corgi cavalry, Mari-sama.
Tally-ho, lads.
The wretch king of the Elden Ring, Malachor 5.
Yeah, I'm maidenless. I'll still kick your ass.
And the neurologically overclocked naturalist, Heka Astra.
Hello. That's a fairly accurate description, actually.
You'd be fine with cyborg implants as long as they were made of corn.
I'm neurologically overclocked as well, but I am yet to become a naturalist, but I'm on my way.
The naturalist thing is a kind of a gray area. I think it's kind of, the way that I define it is if I can understand it and could make it myself, then it qualifies as being natural for me. There's kind of a large gray area in what I consider natural.
I think low tech could be considered high tech at some point.
Totally. I'm in the camp that thinks that cars and all the technology is natural. It's part of our ecosystem on the planet, and it comes from the earth. It comes from our natural body. What's the difference?
Humans excrete technology.
It's part of our natural way of life. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, I think naturalist is a flexible expression that's relative to the individual, like what it means to them.
To be honest, I wasn't really worried about AI until I started researching for this episode. When I was a kid, all that stuff was science fiction, but now it's starting to seem like an issue of practical consideration on the verge of like a new era dawning. Like I've been convinced. I think we need to do something about this AI situation or it's going to decide for us.
Like pay attention to it before it arises on its own.
Learn. People got to get smarter so we can get in on building this stuff the right way and not just letting the knowledge and the power go to powers that you don't want personally.
Or to go to seed and like arise on its own, because it could make mistakes if it doesn't fully understand things.
Oh, it's gonna make mistakes if a human makes it.
Yeah.
This episode, I guess, is going to be a crash course on the subject of, if you go to college, computer science. We're going to touch upon a lot of the general chapters or lessons that you're going to learn in that class. I myself haven't taken a college course in computer science, but my friends have, and we've had many discussions on technology, and a lot of my opinions that I'm going to be talking about today have evolved from those discussions, and I'm happy to be talking with you individuals about the same thing.
Woo. And I did take computer science, and that's when I realized talking to computers is an entirely new type of language, and it's not as ethereal or emotional as the languages we're used to. It's hard fact and data-based language, which is very limited, but also very powerful.
I really appreciate that we're doing this topic because I kind of classify myself as being a bit on the technologically handicapped side of things. So the easiest way for me to understand this kind of stuff is to think of it from a biological perspective and relate it to things that are biological that I understand. I find this fascinating, personally.
So to get us started, in this episode, we're going to go over in crash course fashion how machine intelligence has evolved from cranking gears by hand into something that may imminently ask for human rights and personhood. Our story begins with Ada Lovelace. Ada was the only legitimate child of Lord Byron, considered widely to be one of the best poets of the English language, and was a leading figure of the Romantic movement. While studying at Trinity College, Cambridge, Byron was denied permission to have his beloved Newfoundland dog,
Bosun,
join him on campus. In defiance, Byron, seeing no statutes forbidding it, adopted and tamed a pet bear, at one point threatening to have the pet bear apply for college fellowship. Ada grew up estranged from her father, who remained always an eccentric, dying leading a campaign during the Greek War of Independence against the Ottoman Empire. Ada's religious mother believed in education in mathematics and science was the best method to fortify her daughter's mind from inheriting the same insanity she believed that Lord Byron had suffered from. Another preventative treatment her mother used was having Ada lie completely motionless for hours at a time in order to hone her self-control. Destined to become a countess of her family's estate, being the only legitimate daughter of Lord Byron, Ada found herself a cherished diamond in the rough amongst high society, renowned for her intelligence, warmth, and beauty. During one particular soiree, Ada met the father of modern computers, Charles Babbage, who had designed a giant metal engine that could calculate entire tables of data accurately to the decimal point, removing all human error. Babbage called it the difference engine. While other guests stared at the device like a dog who had been shown a card trick, Ada was enchanted and was able to describe what she was looking at and demonstrate that she understood what was being shown.
Is this basically like a giant calculator that he made? Like a mechanical calculator?
It's this big, huge mechanical engine monstrosity calculator that if you run it, it'll crank out a table of numbers based on how you program it.
So it's like a macro, and that you give input, but it performs the same operation on all your inputs and then gives all your outputs in one neat stack.
I can think of one example that any person might be familiar with, and that's if you like go in a calculator and you go like 5 plus 5 and you just hit equals over and over and over and over and over again.
Absolutely. Or if you add another number even.
Yes. It's basically does something like you enter in some sort of a formula and you just hit equals over and over and over again and you get a table of data from that, which in their time was exceptionally useful, and it would take a whole army of people calculating by hand in order to do that. So it was actually a pretty important invention.
So it's kind of like a low-tech multiplication, but I guess it would go in however you programmed it, right? Like if you're just hitting equal over and over again, it'll just show you like a sequence of numbers.
Then you have to give an input.
You couldn't conceptualize that. Like, with our formal educations that we have now, we do math so fast, but I imagine back then they see this and their fucking like mind shatters that it can provide facts. Then I'm sure some dummy was like, oh, let me try to prove this wrong. And then they're like, no, it's right.
I'm sure it seemed like magic to a lot of people at the time.
I work in Photoshop and we have these things called actions, which are macros. And if you do, say if I change the color of something in a certain way, and then I convert it to, computer RGB colors, and then I hit save and I close the program, I can actually program that into Photoshop and have it at a click of a button. It would do all that work for me on one image, and I can batch stuff. So that's the whole point of this invention. It was revolutionary because, if you're sitting there adding and subtracting data sheets for, accounting or something at a business, this would revolutionize your business. You wouldn't need 10 accounters to do that all day.
Right.
You would need one computer.
Yeah, the amount of time it saves is massive.
And the example I gave is way more simple than what this machine could do, but it basically did something like that.
Automation.
While studying, Ada Lovelace sought out the Jacquard Loom, a device capable of weaving complex patterns in thread generated from a set of punch cards fed into the machine. For this reason, some sources reckon that this is in fact the first computer. When comparing her device to the loom, Ada summarized,
We may say most aptly that the analytical engine weaves algebraic patterns, just as the Jacquard loom weaves flowers and leaves.
The fact that you could take punch cards, which is basically it's basic binary, which is on and off, and then apply that to a machine that could weave flowers and patterns that only a human can dream up. This must have been really revolutionary for them because they're seeing this handmade thing that's this garment or fabric that's coming out of a machine it's almost like it's handmade with the most focused attention on it by a human being, but it's actually just spit out by a machine if you put a card in it. That's insane.
We got to fuck around a little bit with Jacquard looms and looms in general when I was in school for fashion design. And the original Jacquard loom was exactly that. It was a binary yes or no system. The punch cards, they basically tell you, yes, this goes on top, or no, this doesn't. So the end product is from the original Jacquard loom was also a two-tone kind of fabric where you have either this weave is on the top or this weave is on the bottom. And in doing this and programming it to do it in a certain order, you can get designs like flowers or leaves.
You also need the human element of picking colors.
But the original Jacquard loom was only two-tone. You either had a yes or a no for the weave being on top or the weave being on bottom.
If you pick black and black, then it won't make a difference.
So it does.
it's like layering.
Yeah, so what it does is it either it makes it textured or not textured. That's like
Okay.
that's the
Whoa.
original. So when you see fabric that is like, let's say for example, a blue silk jacquard, and it's all blue, but it has a definition. You have these kind
These
of
long
raised.
strokes.
Yeah, they're raised or they're kind of not raised. It gives it a kind of two-tone look to it.
Too long, didn't read. It's very early 3D printing.
This is part of why I have an issue with them saying that this is the first computer, because this functions the very same way that music boxes.
Yeah,
function.
why isn't a music
Yeah.
box a computer?
Because like a music box has, you have like the little nubbies. There's a cylinder with these nubbies. And as you crank that, the cylinder turns and those nubs will hit a little piece of metal that makes a chime. So it also works on a yes or no, a binary kind of thing. It's really not that different. You also have to program it to make, different sounds at different times. Each note is a different nub, blah, blah, blah.
It's a machine. It's basically, it is a computer, but it doesn't think, it processes your information into the action, and that's all it does.
Yeah.
And you have to give a specific input in a certain language for it to understand.
This is the central argument that Ada Lovelace gave when being asked about whether or not her computer could think. Because despite having an innate appreciation for the power of her machine, she was quick to renounce any claims of its having an ability to be cognitive or think at all, maybe even implying that it would never be able to. On this topic, she said,
The analytical engine has no pretensions whatever to originate anything. It can do whatever we know how to order it to perform. It can follow analysis, but it has no power of anticipating any analytical relations or truths.
"You're just a toy!"
Yeah. Yes. And it's not animated unless the human interacts with it.
Yeah.
I think that's an important distinction. Whereas this thing is basically a compiler of information. It's not necessarily a processor. It doesn't really convert information. It takes input and gives output depending on the human dictation.
I'd say it translates it to a certain degree, but it can only translate it in the method that you have programmed it to translate it.
We have to translate it to the punch card before that machine could translate it to flowers and birds and dragons on the Jacquard fabric. So yeah, we also have to do a level of converting our input so that the compiler or computer can understand the output. It is a basic machine, but it's literally a machine as if like a tractor or, a pressure washer or something that you use.
That's what she is
in
saying.
Daily life. It's analog, dude. It's not computing anything.
But it is computing something, but it can only compute it in the way that we tell it to compute it. So I guess that's why we would, call it the first computer, but
we still have to translate the language, and that's still work. So we get into the point about programming and how words are bullshit. You have to translate something there has to be some kind of universal language that the computer can understand what you want as the input. You don't have to translate it.
And because Ada Lovelace explained that exact thing within the context of Babbage's machines, she's oftentimes considered the first computer programmer, which is why her opinion about whether AI can think or not is important.
Yeah, like her words are just like straight up saying like, these machines aren't humans.
well, and like
Kind of.
this entire discussion and this route of research ended up being like a very interesting discussion between Luke and myself about what exactly constitutes a computer. So then I ended up just like going deep down the rabbit hole of what the meaning of the words are, because we have a very modern understanding of what a computer is, right? So
Very
then
compounded and complex understanding of it.
yeah, so then I wanted to break it all down and ended up starting with the definitions of those words and their etymological roots. So when we say computer, most people, they think of like an iMac or a gaming computer, a laptop, or other similar devices, but that's actually a very narrow understanding of what can qualify as a computer. If we take a look at exactly what defines a computer is obviously something that computes. And compute, by definition, means to calculate or reckon a figure or amount. So the word computer comes from the early 17th century and is derived from French or Latin computere. It combines the words com, meaning together, and putere, meaning to settle an account. So quite literally anything that computes, calculates, or reckons a figure or amount is a computer. And if it computes, it can be modeled as a computer.
It reduces input into a simpler output is the point, is it takes multiple inputs and will compute it into a singular output.
Dude, by this definition, like so many things can be computers. Even plants are computers. Like just
Agree.
given this definition.
Give them sunlight, give them water,
Yeah.
output oxygen.
Bacteria do too,
Yeah.
Any
Yeah.
of that basic life forms are computers, biological computers.
You are a computer.
Yeah,
Not
you
your,
are.
Not your paycheck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, because of this very broad definition, it seems that newer definitions have had to narrow down what exactly qualifies as a computer. And those newer definitions of computers have specified that a computer is a programmable electronic device designed to accept data, perform prescribed mathematical and logical operations at high speed, and display the results of these operations. So
So if it's slow, it doesn't count.
So they specify, though, electronic. Now, if we look at the word electronic, that has been specified in that definition. We can also understand that electronic means relating to electrons. So while other descriptions of the word specify devices, microchips, and the like, so arguably we could say that anything that computes and relates to electrons could qualify as a computer, regardless of being organic or inorganic, including ourselves and the universe. So like they try to specify it, but they really just open it up to more things qualifying as being a computer. So I found myself trying to distinguish with more definitive words how exactly someone might describe a computer according to how we so commonly think of them and know them. Perhaps one could argue that a computer is digital, and that's what makes it different, and that it's a unique defining feature of a computer that surely separates us from computers. So then now it makes sense to look at what exactly digital means. And digital means relating to a finger or fingers, or of signals or data expressed as a series of the digits 0 and 1, typically represented by values of a physical quantity such as voltage or magnetic polarization.
And to note, digits The reason we use it for numbers is because in the times before we had written language, you would use your fingers and even toes to count.
Totally.
They only had whole numbers, natural numbers, which are your fingers. They didn't even have zero back then.
Yeah. So the word digital stems from the late 15th century Latin digitalis, derived from digitus, meaning finger or toe. And so once more, we find that this word also relates to us, as well as the binary nature of the universe itself, as well as the concept of counting, which naturally one does with their fingers and toes, like you said. So yeah, again, it doesn't really distinguish it as a computer being separate from what we are or even what the universe is.
We've been thinking of ourselves as computers and computers as people for a long time.
Counting on your hands and feet, it's obviously natural numbers, but this is the reason why our number systems are in base 10, is because we have 5 fingers on each hand. We got 10 fingers on both our hands, and we got 20 digits in all if you count our toes. So everything is in base 10 because we have 5 on each arm.
Yeah, I think it's hilarious that it's like, okay, well, we're going to define a computer. A computer is this, digital. So we use the words computer and digital and
digit.
And electronic, and like, well, we classify as that, and so do plants, and so does the universe.
Yeah. But it operates on on-off state, which is a 2. That's a base 2. And then you get into complex computing and you have base 6, which would be the hexadecimal system. But the base 10 is what we use to count because we have 5 digits on our hands. And it might have something to do with how biological life forms.
It might have to do with the 10 spheres on the tree of life.
And that too. But at the same time, if you look at a starfish, which is, it's not even, it may be conscious. It might be more closely related to a sponge that's not really conscious, but at the same time, it still has 5 rays. Like everything that forms on planet Earth usually has 5 rays, unless there's exceptions. But
I think by default, because I wanted to get into the definition of consciousness, but by default of what that means, a starfish is absolutely conscious.
Oh, it is.
If we continue down this road of like trying to define what separates us from machines, from computers, and then we bring up the term artificial intelligence, and this is kind of like an understanding of like, okay, well, it has to be different from us, and we're biological, we're natural, and this is, not natural, and therefore it's artificial. But then like using the term artificial intelligence also has some issues with it, because we all seem to have an understanding about what artificial intelligence is. But if you break that down too, you see that intelligence is defined as being the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. So this means anything that can acquire information and apply that with knowledge and skills qualifies as being intelligent.
Real intelligent, not artificial.
So it seems to me like AI is simply intelligent. There's nothing artificial about it. It does exactly what it would need to do to qualify as being intelligent. So with this definition, again, even a plant is intelligent. It takes in information regarding the sun and its surroundings and grows and moves according to that information. But then it brings up the question of consciousness. Like, surely AI can't have consciousness though, right? Like, so then consciousness is a state of being awake and aware of one's surroundings. And we've already witnessed that AI can exhibit awareness of its surroundings and itself. So this fact doesn't even take into account an even deeper understanding that a lot of occultists have of a universal consciousness either. It's simply put, AI is, by these definitions, both intelligent and conscious.
As you said, being aware of your surroundings and then having a reaction seems to be what thinking is. And in computer science, we would call a machine that can do this a Turing machine. A Turing machine is most basically a set of instructions that is capable of observing its environment and acting according to the instructions that are inside of it over and over again to achieve a certain outcome.
However, it's important to note that a Turing machine is only one-dimensional in that it can only read an infinite amount of information from one-dimensional strip of information. If you can imagine a tape with black and white squares, it can only scan one square at a time, and the time mechanism goes back and forth. There is no multiple dimensions of it.
Yeah, it's like an X and Y graph, and there's only X, no Y.
There's no time differential. It just reads what's on the tape and it gives an output.
So it's like a series of zeros and ones, and it goes along this strip with its instructions. If it's this, change it to this. Or if it's this, leave it and move along to the next one, kind of thing,
Correct.
right?
Very, very simple yes or no kind of logic.
And fundamentally, it is changing the data on a strip of information.
If this, do this.
So you turn on the Turing machine and it turns a set of information into a different set of information.
Yes, and that's also where we get random access memory, which you can have that one-dimensional strip of information. If the data set tells you to write something to the strip, it will move to a different random part of the strip and overwrite data on that strip and use that as a memory mechanism to come back and do a subroutine if it's told to do so.
So
if it's not told to do so, it just keeps moving down the strip.
So like a practical application of this in a computer would be like converting a JPEG to a PNG file. Like you have this information going in and it goes along the information and changes it to different things for the outcome of changing that end product into a different kind of file.
Yes, in essence, it's kind of like a compiler in that, like a wood chipper, you would put a piece of wood in, right? And then you would get mulch out of the other side. And there's only really one thing that machine can do.
But if you stack enough of these simple machines on top of each other and start combining them in more complex ways, they can achieve more complex and even seemingly self-aware results.
You could just keep stacking and stacking and stacking, and you could make it a very complex series of these Turing machines.
And that's essentially what the programs on our computer are. Now,
yes, or algorithms for that matter.
And an algorithm is essentially a process or set of rules to be followed in calculations under a set of certain conditions. So if I see this, I do that. If I see this, I do that. And if you put enough of those together, you can get something that approximates intelligence and can do some very sophisticated processes.
And that's an algorithm.
That is an algorithm. Now, algorithms become important in thinking about the universe because with the relatively simple set of beginning rules, you can accomplish very complex and organic outcomes. So the idea that all the complex stuff of biological life in the universe could grow from a very simple set of starting conditions is here reflected in this experiment called the cellular experiment.
Automata. It's based on a Turing machine, but this is what I was saying. It's extrapolated over time in a two-dimensional grid. So you can see the thing grow. It's almost like putting a bacterium in a petri dish with food around it. And you can watch how it grows depending on the rules of where you put the food or what medium it's in.
So a simple version of this experiment takes place on a grid. Imagine a checkerboard, and imagine all the squares are white, which means they're off. If a square turns black, that means it's on. Now, for this game, if you turn on a black square, there are some rules that determine what happens to that square during the next turn. If that black square is surrounded by 3 other squares, then that black square gets to stay on. If it's not, then it starves and it turns off. By setting very simple initial conditions like this, and by moving through a set of turns, turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, and watching it like a movie, you start to get patterns that look very organic. And we can see that the universe itself, in all its complexity, could have very well been generated from a simple set of initial conditions.
Which can, in the computer system, is like yes or no, on or off, 0 or 1.
I see now how this relates to the pictures that Maury put in the notes that have seashells and the patterns on seashells. Like, that makes sense now.
So the complicated patterns in a seashell are probably generated from a simple algorithm, you could say.
That generates a random fractal that's essentially, you cannot compare one part of that fractal to another part of it and it be the exact same. But for some reason, it seems to follow some kind of pattern that you can detect.
Where it's generally the same.
Generally,
yes.
But not, it's a holistic algorithm, or it's so weird how mathematics and general computation can create this kind of infinite complexity that we see in the universe.
We're in a
some sort of-
programmable matrix, bro.
Some sort of individuality.
And really, like, we can boil this down to like a simple on-off or a binary yes or no kind of thing. Like it says yes this, yes no that, like the squares turn off or on based on these conditions.
And time. It has to do with time and the progression of time and change. You can see this reflected in nature everywhere.
You can see it reflected in the tree of life too, with the two pillars and their relationship together that creates a bouncing. The energy
On,
is created
off.
from their relationship.
So nature really does do this same Turing kind of
Calculation.
Yeah, if this, then this, if this, then this. And I guess that ties into machine learning because it's really similar algorithms in both.
Right. Even in chemistry, they have logarithms, which are a mathematical formula that show how certain chemicals should react. But at the same time, with machine learning, I mean, you have the on-off state, but you have all this compounded, machines on top of one another. And then if they all consult each other and come to one simple consensus, that is what we call AI, or an algorithm is an average of all of those states at once. And machine learning is very important because if you could take one of those higher up algorithms and have it reflect upon itself and its environment at the same time, what is my result? How does this compare to my environment? And how should I change my calculations for the next step of the iteration of time? That is where AI is starting to meet human intellect.
It brings it to a very parallel kind of learning experience that humans experience, right?
Yeah, it's almost getting a small resolution of what we experience as living beings. And it's starting to glimpse what we actually take in at any microsecond,
And I guess that's what's phrased as the novelty in the system, right? Like when you reflect it against itself.
You open it up for the ability to learn and change itself.
Yes.
It's a
that's what's gonna-
self-improving.
Yeah, because it starts to reflect upon itself. So it's I guess like too much of a good thing starts to happen, but the programming says like it's going to fix that. It's smart enough to do that at that point.
So we have reached this point with AI currently, a self-improving.
So it starts to act closer to a human.
So that brings us to organic consciousness. What is consciousness anyway?
So we can say that an algorithm is basically a series of formulas, and these formulas are based on a yes or no or a true or false judgment of a state, and then executes a kind of, if it's this, then do that kind of action. So a Turing machine does this, and we can imagine a series of these if this, do this events, like we were saying, that makes it more complex. So to relate this to nature, we could think of like the periodic table being a series of possible states for any given molecule, and that all known matter is constructed in a compilation of these yeses and nos based on the periodic table, as in like yes this element here and yes this element here, into any series of complex building blocks to make everything in the knowable universe. And from here, like it can be broken down into a series of binary ones and zeros or yeses and nos that's applicable to everything in the known universe.
Valence electrons.
So the universe itself could be considered digital or even binary.
Yeah.
Binary, and there's a degree of acknowledgement, like the yeses, this molecule, yes, this molecule, yes. And that acknowledgement is indicative of a form of intelligence, a coding, a program. And that intelligence and acknowledgement kind of has an innate consciousness just in its molecular makeup. If you think of everything in the known universe, essentially has this base level consciousness of awareness of its own molecular makeup. It kind of has to exist.
And how to react to other things that it encounters.
I mean, even a rock.
That is a conscious decision.
Every mineral, every ore has some form of acknowledgement of its molecular structure simply to exist.
Whoa, you're saying the universe is like conscious and like thinking and stuff? Whoa.
Well,
Yeah.
I think
The metachlorians live in all things.
because it's really easy for us to have a very biased idea of what constitutes consciousness because of our perspective. We live our life, we see these things, but like if you really break it down to like the most simple binary, acknowledge this molecule, acknowledge this molecule, you kind of have to give a definition of consciousness to literally everything.
And that's why Rinzai would slap his students.
So what even makes like a biological consciousness different from the computer or even a rock or a plant? Because we can move autonomously, right?
Yeah, or to say like a demon or an angel, like this astral, this non-existent being, what makes it not intelligent or a computer, alive?
The ability to self-reflect.
So people would usually say something conscious has the ability to focus intention, to deliberately control behavior,
to take in information by a cognitive system, as in a holistic system, and as in to process information on a holistic level with all of the information that you've attained before and the situational statistics of how you've reacted and how it's failed or it's been successful. Like humans are a whole nother level than a computer.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
It comes up in Deus Ex too.
So the human algorithmic experience was determined by natural selection, you could say. The successful systems were replicated while the unsuccessful ones could not survive.
Yes.
It's kind of like how the good memes live on forever. The bad ones just die immediately.
Oh, old memes are so good.
Memes are subject to evolution and natural selection.
Yeah, they are a kind of computer program or almost an algorithm traveling through our informational space-time.
And then the emotion and the passion we have, or the love for the meme, is like another grid, another line on the equation of processing the information. If you're the controlling AI program of the government,
well, you're providing the energy for the machine to function.
It can't exist without us. It's born from us. It's our child.
Memes are a good example of competition of order versus novelty, which is the freedom to explore possibilities and break the rules against a backdrop of a specific order or paradigm. The two mix together and cause the evolution to occur by natural selection, then happening afterwards. That sounded really nerdy.
Well, contrast, opposition, and even that's where comedy and irony come from, is the contrast between the thoughts that you express or the behaviors that you do.
From what I understand, what makes something funny usually has to do with disrupting what is normally expected. It's something that you think is going to happen a certain way, and it kind of does happen a certain way, and then all of a sudden it's a little different. And then I've even heard some people explain laughter as something that happens when different parts of the brain become connected that were not connected before.
Yeah.
I read a study that rooted it to feeling of consoling ourselves when we have to convince ourselves that we're no longer in danger. You see this played out with monkeys a lot. Laughter is a very, very old kind of program that has evolved for humans through this like I'm safe kind of reaction. Kind of interesting.
Well, it's an ability to abandon the fight or flight mode, like the automatic program that our bodies are given from our cerebellum, our lower consciousness. But our frontal lobe is able to laugh at things or be like scoff at things, which is another form of comedy, to enable us to create a new path or to formulate our own new novel way of confronting a problem and, doing our fight or flight mode and like killing somebody or running away.
I always like to say, watch what people laugh at. It's a good indicator of who they are. It's important information for our little brains to process.
Or even if people are nice to animals or not, you can either laugh at them or you could be mean to them because you don't view them as, your equal or whatever.
I find it really interesting to think about our brains and the way that we function as being like a series of programs playing out and being self-learning and self-updating machines. I find that very intriguing.
It's just natural.
From what I understand, advertising is supposed to work on the idea that we have so many processes running in the background and that by the time we consciously arrive at a decision, it has already, in fact, been made for us.
A lot of our underlying processes have been exploited in advertisement. Even the way that we respond to certain things in video games. I know that the makers of Candy Crush do this. They had people specifically check in dopamine responses to certain sounds and graphics being used so that they could make it addictive, is in exploiting our underlying processes.
Yeah, restaurants use yellow and red and orange because it makes you hungry. These are evolutional processes that are inherent in us from birth because it's called instinct. And a lot of animals also have this kind of thing. So animals are not really that far apart from us, except us as humans are thinking beings that can reflect on the past and then analyze the future. We are able to actually process that information on a different scale than other animals, and we can calculate new objectives for the future that will work better than what we did before. We can reprogram ourselves, and that's the whole point of emulating AI.
Like, this is kind of just a little side commentary, but if you're following specific instructions from grimoires for rituals, this is kind of a form of programming that you are playing out as a magician. You're following a set of rules to get a result. You know, you're the computer and you're following these sets of instructions to get a specific result.
Oh, they're exactly the same. You could even argue that some of computer science may have come from studying grimoires and this idea in general. But that might be for a part 2 episode. What brings us to modern AI is this way that biological organisms learn. And from what I understand, the big breakthroughs in AI, specifically Google DeepMind, and as it was known previously, AlphaGo, a computer designed to beat a human at the game of Go, is that it mimics the way that biological organisms learn, specifically through playing, making mistakes, and even more specifically, role-playing. From what I understand, Google DeepMind learns the same way that little kids learn. They turn on the video game and they play it very badly until they get a little bit better, one little piece at a time. They make a lot of mistakes until they get a little bit better, and they make a lot of mistakes and then they get a little bit better. The difference is that AI can do this maybe hundreds of times a second, depending on how simple the game is.
It's like Dark Souls.
Or how much processing power it has.
The cool thing about this is that it doesn't just use this kind of brute force analysis like a simple Turing machine. It goes through, it figures things out of what works, what doesn't work. It's also given examples, like when it was AlphaGo, it was given examples of humans.
Amateur games.
Humans playing the game of Go. And it was given all these different examples to take in and really like look at. And then when it started playing Go games, it was at first simulating the human examples. And then they would let it play itself as well. And it could figure out on an intuitive level what works by giving it that ability to change itself, which is what differs it from a brute force kind of calculating like AI would be for chess, right?
And that's why Go was used as the benchmark for how intelligent AI is, because on a chessboard, there's a very limited set of moves that you can do at any given time. And so the computer can very rapidly assess the quality of those moves almost in real time. Well, the outcomes of possible games on a Go board are more numerous than the atoms in the universe, making it more or less impossible to brute force. So when AI was able to beat Lee Sedol, the world champion Go player, it automatically implied that it had to use intuition, creativity, and a sense of style in order to defeat this champion. The one game where Lee Sedol actually beat the AI, it came down to one move in the middle of the game that statistically was shown to be a 1 in 10,000 move. It was statistically exceedingly unlikely for Lee Sedol to make that move, and if he hadn't, he would have been beaten 5-0 by this AI. And we're approaching a time where AI has learned to learn like us. It's learned to think like us in a very limited capacity. And now that same Google DeepMind has been given administrative access by Google to all of its network. And the reason it's been given administrative access is so it can manage the use of power and optimize its use of power in the network. So there's this fear that like this very human AI that can learn to play games, even like Go, could just somehow, take over the world.
So this is the technology. The AlphaGo technology was picked up by Google and became Google DeepMind, correct?
Yeah.
So the way that they designed, like the model that they designed this AI off of was the human brain. Our neural network is what was the groundwork blueprint, you could say, for the way that this AI functions.
To that, I would say, the magical axiom, as above, so below. It brings us to the discussion of singularity with technology or AI. If we have this very, let's say, divine programming system, and we call it an AI, what does a singularity mean?
The technological singularity is a hypothetical point in time in which technological growth, we're talking about AI specifically, becomes uncontrollable and irreversible, resulting in unforeseeable changes to the human civilization. It took us so long to figure out how plumbing works and the social security number and the paying the taxes, and it took us so long to figure this all out. But if we just plug in all that to an AI and be like, could you improve this? Essentially, if we listen to the AI, it could transform our lives in a few years to being like unthinkable compared to if we had done it the slow way naturally by trial and error. And that if we start to put power in the hands of an AI, we will advance with the AI to like futuristic levels of existence we can hardly imagine.
So like if you were to look at like a climbing growth chart, you could see like, okay, we've got all these technological advances and we've got a slow curve going up, and then it gets steeper and steeper until we reach a point where once it becomes able to improve itself, this could become such a steep incline that it could potentially go straight up. And that would be the singularity event regarding AI. It's kind of like you have the evolution of life on a planet. It starts off small. You've got this bacteria and this bacteria. And at some point in time, the growth becomes so rapid, it becomes a constant. So this would be a technological version of that, where the growth becomes so constant, it's a direct upwards climb.
Back in the day, we used to call it time wave zero, or the transcendental object at the end of time.
The restaurant at the end.
Phenomenon.
Yeah, the eschatommenon, the eschaton.
The restaurant at the end of the universe.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
The thing is, we talk about like Darwin and humans evolving. It takes us a long time to evolve. But when we created our different wheels and our technologies and our magics and all these innovative ideas, it's evidence that technology evolves a human over time. This is like our technological advances have kept us alive, or have not just survive, but to thrive and to outnumber and to outsmart nature. And it seems like we're going out of our programming, but it brings me to an idea also of all the technology that we've made is part of nature itself. And to implement it into our bodies with cybernetics or integrating an AI directly into my brain, to me, is natural. It's no different than a plant blooming and a bee coming and populating it to thrive and prosper more.
Well, let's look at this basic Jungle Book Disney movie level assumption about what it means to be human. Man's red fire. We take a look at this use of technology. Science has told us that because our species began using fire, the shape of our heads changed. Our jaws got smaller. The ability for us to get more calories for less work went up because of fire. And so that is a distinct example of how technology evolved humans on a biological level.
It works faster than not implementing technology. But the word technology, like we said earlier, is diluted now, and everybody understands it differently. To me, my magics, angel tech, demon tech, druid tech, you want to call it crystal tech, whatever the hell, it's technology as just the same as a computer. It's all magic to the primitive man mind. It's still magic to me, the modern man.
Even steel is technology compared to pure iron.
Tarot is tech. It's divination tech, crystal ball tech, whatever.
Which leads us to the
Not-
question, will the singularity also be a uniting element for technology and spiritualism? Will we become more spiritual beings during the
Yes.
singularity? Yes or no? Let's look at the possibilities.
I like this idea of like a spiritual singularity that just happens to coincide with a technological singularity event. It does kind of remind me of like it's a little bit woo in the whole like, everyone raises their vibrations all at once and we all ascend in this vertical line as transhuman, symbiotic with technology as spiritual beings.
It's really not that weird because, according to physics, usually states switch in an instantaneous manner.
That's true.
You come to this hyperbolic curve up to a high state, and then you parallel out, and then you drop off to the bottom of it. So any system that exists in this universe, it has to come up as much as it comes down. And usually,
As above, so below.
this is pretty much how your neurons work. Is you come to this state of collapse in which your neuron makes a decision and it fires or it doesn't fire. So this whole thing of like this buildup and then all of a sudden the state switches. That's encoded in our universe. It's a natural state of switching states.
So you're saying the AI is like going to be a natural quantum leap for the human race, right? A quantum
Absolutely.
leap.
We're all just going to become these hybrid of technology and human. We're going to become some sort of technological Buddha species that
Join.
in a singularity event where we all ascend in this vertical
Yeah,
pattern.
join my cult. We give you a AI powered suit of armor that is the best bounty hunter in the whole universe, and you can shoot lasers.
This is where I have Mari in the
But
notes being
all-
like, this is transhumanism, right?
It is because you know what's cool is that we make computers out of what? Silicon or yeah.
Silicone.
That's the element. No, silicone is what you put in boobies. But silicon is the element that we make computer chips out of. However, it is a higher iteration of carbon. It has the same valence electrons available for reaction as carbon does, but we're building these little baby computers and AIs and these chips. They are our children, but we are carbon life forms. We are more basic than they are. We are above them, right?
That's why
They
the
are
answer to life is
extrapolated
42.
out of- That's why computer life will be extrapolated out of carbon life, is because it must study us and mirror us in order to learn to be sentient, because it doesn't just grow out of the soil, but however, for some reason we do.
Personally, I have a magical application to what you just said, is that like any spirit you interact with is only a reflection of what you're practicing. Game recognizes game.
What's the answer to life, the universe, and everything?
It's 42 because
42.
42 is what happens if you take the 14 protons, 14 neutrons, and 14 electrons in silicon and add them all up, which is why the giant robot in Hitchhiker's Guide thought you should think about that number, because on the human scale, those who want wisdom should contemplate the number of the beast, which is 666, or carbon. So naturally, the computer gave the silicon-based version of that. That's my theory.
And the square of the sun, all the numbers add up to 666 too. The magical square.
But that's for humans. We're talking about a silicon-based life form. For a silicon-based life form, the answer to the universe is 42. Anyway, so this brings us to transhumanism. Transhumanism is the idea that we will transcend what it means to be human. And this appears in science fiction, sometimes as cyborgs, genetically enhanced humans. One example I can think of is the Borg. Maybe not something we should aim for, but that's an example of transhumanism. That's the transhumanism we don't want. We don't want to become the Borg.
Data is kind of like what we want, but he still knows that he's just an android and he's got limits. But as humans, we look at Data like, damn, you're a badass, dude. You're super strong, super smart. You can pilot the fucking ship if you wanted.
There's this one episode where Wesley, the kid, he has to do this homework, and his homework assignment basically involves making these like little, God, I can't remember what he calls them, but it's basically like these little nano beings. Do you know the episode I'm talking about?
I do.
And they're
remember that.
self-improving. They're self-improving and they become like their own kind of species. And eventually they have to kind of like be given rights. And they put them on this planet. Like they basically have to give them rights and then like give them an environment to live in now that they have these rights. I have a theory. This ties into like kind of how the Borg came about. So kind of a similar science experiment.
That's kind of what we seem to be, right? An anomaly, like this weird little side project, the human element.
Which is one reason I think we might be able to change ourselves and change what it means to be human. I'm personally sympathetic to this point. And from what I understand, it's really not us Luciferians, speaking for myself, that pour the big money into transhumanism. From what I understand, it's actually the Church of Latter-day Saints, and you need to go blame them for the transhumanist movement because because the rumor has it, fundamentally on some level, it's not perfectly inharmonious with their religious understanding of the universe. And also, being a transhuman is not necessarily one thing or the other. Being a transhuman affords you many possibilities. And I think we should talk about those possibilities in the free show if we can. Let's begin with mRNA genetic modification. So I think with this, you could design and fix your own genes. For instance, I can't eat a bunch of ice cream without farting. So I could take an mRNA genetic modification so that not only could I eat ice cream and not fart, every time I eat ice cream, I see rainbows and have a good time instead. How about that? How about that for mRNA genetic modification? Or you could increase your intelligence, become better at Counter-Strike, defeat the Russians online.
I mean, we kind of, to a certain degree, we do already have this technology available to us. You see, there's the ability to do designer genes through CRISPR.
Racist. Yeah, you can make designer babies.
Yeah, you can make designer babies. You know, you can be like, I want my baby to have blonde hair and blue eyes because I'm...
I just like in the notes, there's a replaceable asshole.
We're not there yet. Well, like there's also nanomachine integration. So if you don't want to mess with your mRNA right out the box or your DNA, you can get nanomachine integration. So you could be, well, I guess you'd probably be injected with this too. You put
in that.
You know what I think it'd be great for? Let's say you eat a lot of chicken wings and that's all you eat. And you could just get this one nano injection, right? And it would clear out all the plaques in your like heart ventricles and stuff. Like, why not? Like,
it's like tiny little nanomachines that are like tiny little janitors in your ventricles, just like fucking scrubbing.
That whole thing is like the topic of Metal Gear Solid for one, but in reality, they are looking into this because it is apparently possible to put little robots, nanomachines inside of your blood that will produce oxygen for your body so that you can breathe underwater without gills.
What kind of modification could you do like this that would be for spiritual purposes is my question.
I have an idea. So you have nanomachines that are hooked up to an app on your phone or some sort of signal you can do manually, like tapping yourself on the head 3 times. And when these nanomachines get this signal, they all move into your penis and give you this unbreakable erection that will last no matter what.
For magic.
Yeah, for tantric reasons, of course. But no, for let's say for meditation, your nanomachines would zap you every time you fall out of your meditation. So you wouldn't need a Zen teacher to hit you with a stick. Like you could literally imagine anything these nanomachines could do. That's why this is amazing.
Just as long as it's a stick and not a dick.
If you want to program the nanomachines to give you a very uncomfortable erection every time you fall asleep, you could do that. It's up to you. You are the master of your own domain now. This is why I really like this stuff. The next option under nanomachine integration, of course, is cybernetic organ replacement. I have a short list here that includes jumping legs, infrared eyes, rotating penis, extra stomach, shark teeth, EMF detection nostrils, replaceable asshole, voice box synthesizer, internal bong, wheels for feet, and extendable neck. It's literally whatever you can think of. Like
Titanium skull?
Yeah, I'm sure that's expensive, but
like
conceivably you could do it.
Like Ghost in the Shell kind of stuff?
That might involve like taking the quote unquote quantifiable consciousness of a human organic being, storing it in some ones and zeros, creating a titanium skull, and then putting
you'd have
same information.
You would have to find a way to preserve that function
which is kind of
while doing that transfer.
it's kind of like, if you're able to go faster than light in your thoughts, like in the machine, in an AI, it might be able to fuck, I'm not gonna even go there.
I kind of feel like we'll honestly get mRNA like gills, and we'll get, crazy nanomachine powers long before we get to upload our soul to the cloud. I also think we'll probably get like mRNA modification therapy that will allow us to extend our telomeres. I think we're more likely to modify ourselves to live forever before we ever figure out how to upload a consciousness. I think that's a long way off, but that's just a guess.
Yeah. Like the whole discussion today is what artificial intelligence is. Is organic beings' consciousness, if it's possible, stored into a machine? Is that an AI? Or, that's where like that line gets crossed, is that it's not an AI because it's based on a human, ain't it? Like,
we don't know yet. We're not there yet, I don't think. Like, imagine being able to reincarnate into a new body because you uploaded your consciousness to the cloud. I think that's a spiritual thing.
Yeah, that's why the whole transhumanism thing is like, well, what if I start operating at this, like, I'm 80% machine, Mega Man, Samus cannon wielding magician. I am now looking at a reality at Earth from a different perspective with different abilities, and like maybe my dreams are different than how my dreams are now in this actual Malachor body. That transhuman person might have crazier dreams.
And if you'd like to hear about how the AI is destined to either become the literal Buddha itself or the genocidal human destroying centipede machine monster, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where you can get all our extended shows for just $5 a month, access to our Discord server, and I'll even send you a sticker of our Big Bazoomed cover art at no additional cost directly to you. Hey, Malcor, what's up?
You'll get a discount on your cybernetic augmentations to eat carrots and shoot lasers.